last Sunday, I was at church and I was leaving. And usually I don't speak to the priest on the way out, or I'll shake his hand quickly and move past, or I'll go out different doors altogether. But last Sunday was different, and I knew that if I didn't speak to him on this particular day, it was almost certain that I would never speak to him again. Regardless of whether or not I spoke to him on this Sunday, it's almost certain that I'll never speak to him again. And so often I was very nervous to have this conversation, and I don't know why, but when I'm nervous, I pre-think what it is that I'm going to say, and often that leads to me overthinking it. But this time I was leaving church and I was in the line, and I knew I had to speak to him. And although I wasn't sure what to say, there wasn't time to think about what I wanted to say. I could either say it in that moment, or I would never have the opportunity. And so that's what I'm going to do here. This has been, my heart is still broken, to be honest with you. It's a beautiful sadness. I'm very excited for the future, but I have sold my van that I've been living in for the past 18 months. And it's kind of like grieving your own life while you're still alive. Because 18 months ago, I sold my house, moved into a van, I traveled across the country, and that was sad, but it was always my intention to come back where I am right now. So, although it was sad to leave my family and friends behind, I knew I was going to see them again. But leaving Florida, Ocala, Florida, that is where I was at. I'll say it now, Ocala, Florida. Leaving Ocala, Florida behind, I had begun to build a life there. And when someone who you love passes away, there's a grieving process. You mourn, and you're losing one person. And this might sound a little bit dramatic, but I really had built a life there. I was close with people. I had a job. I had a girlfriend. I worked at a coffee shop, and I had regulars who poured their heart out to me about their hardships, and I poured my heart out to them. I had a priest who I learned so much from. I had a van that I spent all of my time in, and just like that, within a few days, all of it was gone. And I might see some of those people again, but it's out of my control, and it was out of my control, that life that I had built is no more. Whereas when I left and got into the van, I could come back to this life in a way. I could never go back to exactly what that was. But it's fitting that I'm recording this in front of this river. Because it wasn't in front of this river, but it was in this forest where the river is at that I recorded the first podcast, the first episode. And I've come back to this river a different man. A man can never walk into the same river twice, because it's always a different river, it's always a different man. It's always a different forest, and it's always a different man. Right. Anyway, I was in line preparing to talk to this priest, but I had no idea what I wanted to say. And I sort of just let go. I was overthinking it, and I was nervous, and I was shaking for a moment. But rather than continue being nervous about it, I just accepted that I was going to talk to him, and I had no idea what I was going to say. And finally, I get to the front of the line, and I realized eventually why I was so nervous. And it's because what I told him is, I said, Hey, I just want you to know that I've been going to your church now for a year and a half, and you don't know this about me, but I traveled down here in a van, and I've been living in that van for the past 18 months. But my van has had some mechanical issues. My van has broken down on me. And for that reason, I'm going to have to move back to Indiana. And this is going to be my last time at the church. And then I said, and to be honest with you, I'm really afraid. And I wanted to know if you would bless me, if you would give me a blessing. And right away, he was listening intently to everything that I said. I think I caught him off guard by talking to him at all. And he made the sign of the cross over me, and he began blessing me. And he said a lot within that blessing. But I had started crying while he was speaking. I started weeping tears uncontrollably. And he said so much, I didn't catch almost any of it. But there's one thing that he said that has stuck with me, which is in the blessing, it was like he was speaking directly to God. And he didn't say this in a demanding way. He didn't say it in a he was talking to God, but he didn't say it in a way that was demanding towards God. But he told God to smile upon me. And when he said that, I began crying more, and I just couldn't stop. And he finished the blessing, and then he said he has something that he wants to give me, and he gave me a cross that he pulled out of his pocket. He already had it on him. And he's like, I'm something of a dealer, and he pulled out a cross and he gave it to me. And still crying, he looked me in my eyes. I was weeping, and he said, he's Irish, and he said, "Ah, you're really saddened, aren't you? You're really saddened, aren't you?" And I couldn't really talk. It was kind of just a whimper of what came out of my voice, but I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sad." And shortly after that, that was the end of the conversation, and I kept crying. And that was Sunday. I was in Ocala for the next 3 days. But I want to say something to anybody who's still watching this. I want to convey something of value, which is there's something that has been ringing within my mind over during that time period and even now. And it's been a light in my mind. Well, there's two things, which is one, what he said, that I appreciate that his intention behind asking God to smile upon me. And I think that is what I want. I want God to smile upon me. I want God to please God. I want to live in a way that is pleasing to God, in a way that would make God smile. So that's the first thing. But the words that have been ringing within my mind is a question. And if you ever go through hardships, I would encourage you to ask yourself this question as well, which is, do you want God to change your life or to change you? Do you want God to change your life or to change you? Because truthfully, I sold my house, the house that I had bought from working a job for almost 5 years. And with the sale of that house, that's how I bought a van and had a little bit of extra money to travel down to Florida. But then here I am 18 months later after having bought the van, and I didn't have anything tangible to show for it. I didn't really have any accomplishments, and when I began embarking upon the journey, I didn't know what I wanted to accomplish, but I felt like I ought to accomplish something. And now, having left Florida and having sold my van, I had to sell my van, by the way. I know that I'm not a loser. I know that I'm not a failure, but that doesn't stop the feeling. I still felt like a failure because I hadn't accomplished something. even though I didn't know exactly what even I wanted to accomplish. But that question has been ringing in my mind of, well, do you want God to change your life or to change you? Because here I am, and I recorded the first podcast, the first episode in this same forest, and 18 months later, it's a different forest and I'm a different man. My expectations when I went into the journey, maybe not consciously in the forefront of my mind, but maybe in the back of my mind, maybe my heart was slightly ill-placed. The desires of my heart were slightly ill-placed. I wanted to accomplish something worldly. I wanted to attain something of value. And maybe that didn't happen, but what did happen is I grew. I grew in a way that I could never have grown without having taken the journey. And this river today is a little bit higher than when I left. It's a different river and I'm a different man. Right. Right. So that is what happened with the adventure. That is what all of this has led to. I've done maybe what I would call in my mind a lot. I've spent so much time working a job that ended up buying me a house, but then I sold the house in order to get a van, and I ended up selling the van 4 days ago, only to move back to the exact same place where I'm at. But that is what life is like. That is what the journey of life is like. You go on these adventures and you answer the call to adventure, and you go through dark times only to find yourself back to the exact same place where you were at. And I truly don't mean that in a negative way. I wanted to come back to this place. I always wanted to come back here. It was my aim. But I wanted to get something, and although I didn't know what I wanted to get, I didn't get the thing maybe that my mind would have thought that I wanted, but I got exactly what I needed. And I changed, and one of the most important ways that I changed is that over this past week especially, I've cried quite a bit. I've cried a lot of tears for different people, and in general, in the grieving of the life that I'd lived that is no more, that I cannot go back to. It's over. It's dead. That life is gone. And sadness is an interesting emotion. It's one of the things that I've learned, because we often have these problems, maybe call it emotional problems. You feel anxious. You feel depressed. And especially if you've watched these episodes, or if you watched these episodes, you can see that I was talking a lot about that, especially feeling anxious and irritable and angry. And I didn't know why I was feeling that way. But what happens is you feel irritable, and then you peel that emotion back and you see, well, I'm not angry for no reason. Let me give myself some love, care, and see that I'm angry. The emotion that I feel, although it's coming off as irritable and angry, it's not that, it's that I'm anxious. And the reason why I'm anxious is because I'm walking into a shaky future. So let me give myself some self-care and plan out a better future, because I can't change the exact moment that I'm in, but I could live fully into it if I were walking into a future which would be more desirable. So let me try to do that. And then days and weeks go by, and you still have that internal chaos within you. You still feel dissatisfied and dissatisfied and chaotic. So you peel that new emotion back. Maybe what you title it now is depression. You say that you're depressed, and you put another tangible reason behind that, and you're like, well, the reason I'm depressed is because I see that I'm walking into a shaky and uncertain future, and I've tried to make a plan, but my plan isn't exactly steady, or I don't believe it to be achievable. I don't have faith in the plan. I'm uncertain of what to do next, and so I need to make a better plan, and then I won't be depressed. And so the point is that there's a lot of negative emotions which arise within us, and they have tangible reasons, tangible causes, and tangible solutions as well. But grieving is different. Grieving and mourning and sadness and sorrow, it's different. Because I started to realize, although I did want to come back to this place, I didn't want to let go of the life that I was living down there because I loved it. It was incredibly arduous, but I was grateful for it. And so I had this internal chaos that I literally spoke about in probably the last episode, where I just have this feeling of, my God, why have you abandoned me? But then there's another voice of gratitude and telling me to be patient and telling me to be humble. And the interesting thing is that both of those feelings, both of those emotions are somehow at the same time you. They are me. They are true. But they're also false. They're both of those things at the same time, meaning the true you is the one that doesn't really even have a voice. The one that is just watching the different voices speaking up and the different feelings occurring and the experiences happening. Because my van broke down, and that was the initial catalyst of why I had to come back. And other things happened that I tried to rectify it and make it feasible and make it make sense for me to stay there and continue the journey, because like I said, I felt like I wanted to accomplish something, and I felt like a loser, a failure, because I hadn't accomplished what it is that I set out to do. But no words could rectify it. Although from an outsider's perspective, it might seem like it was in my control, it wasn't in my control. And the only thing I could do is let it happen, is to let go. And that's what when I say that there's these different emotions and they're both simultaneously you and not you, and the true you is actually just the one who is observing, the I that is observing is the one that feels the sadness. And sadness isn't an emotion that you can peel back and find a tangible solution. It's like being at a funeral for someone you love, and you're grieving, and that pain is so brutal. But although we like to bring things into our control, there's nothing that can be done. There's nothing that you can do except let go, whatever that means. Just let it happen, whatever that means. Let God's will happen. And sadness is like sadness and sorrow and grieving. It's like a silent, dark bottom. It's like if you were hiking in a mountain, you go into the trails and There's the top of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain. Sadness is like just being by the river, because water is in the lowest place and the river is going to flow no matter what. Right. Right. And I know that doesn't really make sense, but I don't know how else to describe sadness. It's just something that you feel. And when I've experienced people in my life, people who I loved dying, and I've always kind of thought that there was, you want to, our tendency is to bring things into our control, to bring things within our control. But we can't always do that. Sometimes there's nothing necessarily even to learn. When my dad died, I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. And I felt really bad and I felt guilty about that. So I told myself that what there was to learn from that situation is to cherish the people and forgive the people who are in my life right now and never take anyone for granted. And that is true. But the thing that is even truer than that is, it is just sad. It's just sad, period. It's just sad. And that is what this is like. I built a whole life down in Florida. It's very strange. Life is so strange. I never would have guessed that I would have moved into a van and traveled 1,000 miles away from this place. But what I certainly would have never guessed, even more so, is that the pain that I would feel from leaving this random place that I stumbled upon. I never would have guessed how difficult it would have been to come back. Right. And in the same way that priest loved that guy, and he looked me in my eye, and his only response was, "Oh, you're really saddened, aren't you?" I think we peel back the emotions that we have, anxiety and depression and maybe even fear as well. And I even told him that. I was like, "I'm very afraid. Would you give me a blessing?" I think the true pain, the source of all the pain that really exists, everything else is kind of like just a layer of paint over the actual pain that we want to avoid, which is grief and sadness. And in the Bible, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And I don't know how to describe it, but I felt so compelled to take a photo with my van one last time. Questy, that was my van, Questy. It was a Nissan Quest, and it is gone. I sold it, and I had to watch a tow truck pull it away. I know it's an inanimate object. It's a mechanical vehicle, but I was grateful that it literally carried me across the country. It carried me across the country, and as it was getting towed away, the memories of sleeping in it in a forest by myself, the memories of all of the cities that I went to and all of the people that I met flashed through my mind. And I was grateful for that van. And I'm grateful for all of the people that I've met. And this has been really hard to speak about. I've written about it, and it has been pure chaos, but I had to speak about it. I had to say what has happened here. And the short of what happened is that my vehicle broke down and it didn't work any longer, but I tried to jump it, the battery didn't work. Somebody else came and jumped the battery, it did work. But at that point, I'd already put too many things into motion. I'd already quit my job. I'd already committed to leaving, and I had to make that commitment. And yeah, internal chaos. Internal chaos. But I'm grateful to be back, and I'm grateful for the friends that I have in my life, because otherwise I would be homeless right now. One of my best friends is allowing me to stay in his apartment, and otherwise I would be homeless. And I'm grateful for this podcast as well. I'm grateful for these episodes because, especially in the last day sleeping in my van, everything was leaving me. And I do have the change that I experienced of being a different man and a different forest. But I also have this podcast, and I also have all of these comments that I've received and people who are on similar journeys as myself. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful, and I am pretty nervous. I'm pretty fearful, but I'm extremely excited for what to come. It's a new place, but it's I don't know what the journey is, but it's kind of the same journey. It's a different place, but there are micro journeys and there are long journeys, and I know this maybe was a little bit incoherent rambling. We'll go back to being coherent, and go back to just trying to be a man who's living well. But I had to speak about this, and it would be this is maybe 109 or 110 episodes. It could be I could do 100 I could do another 109 episodes just of what has happened over these past 2 weeks. And I'll talk about things more, but I guess I just had to lay it out there. But the journey does continue. And blessed are those who mourn, because they will be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn, they will be comforted. Figure out why you're sad, because the reason why you feel negative and have internal chaos, it might just be sorrow and grief and sadness, and you might as well let yourself see it, and even more than see it, you might as well let yourself feel it, because sadness, although it's strangely painful and it's a silent rock bottom, it is beautiful. Right. Right. And for now, that is all that I have. Goodbye.